Do you ever wonder where our food comes from? Like, this is a peanut butter jelly sandwich, right? And I got the jelly right here. I got the peanut butter right here. You can tell, obviously, they're both from Kroger because of the little symbol. But where did the peanut butter and the jelly come from? Where did Kroger get those materials? Same thing with bread. Where did the yeast and stuff for the bread come from? These are very similar questions that Kelsey Timmerman asked in his book, Where Am I Eating? If someone asked me, hey Isaac, should I read Where Am I Eating? I would tell them yes, because this book does such a good job on explaining globalization to people who don't really understand how important and impactful that is. Okay, let's define globalization. Because the word is extensive and it's continuously evolving, it's hard to pin down. But here's what we do know. Globalization is the resulting communication of different societies and cultures throughout the world. What was important in what I just said was the resulting of globalization. Because throughout globalization, many things can change, including trade, culture, wealth, and knowledge. And that's really what this book talks about, are those four issues. Okay, let's talk about wealth first in globalization. Tinnerman does a great example of this in the coffee section, actually, because he talks about how Starbucks and coffee farmers, and how coffee farmers provide, the coffee beans for Starbucks to make their delicious coffee. But actually in that cup, only 2% of the profits of the cup goes back to the farmers, which is a very sad but true situation. And it shows how the wealth is not distributed evenly between country like Colombia, culture, and United States. But for some countries, they're actually doing really well with this wealth and globalization, like China in the apple juice section. In that section, they talked about how the apple juice farmer is actually making a lot of money, and he's actually doing really well for himself, even though he's outsourcing just like the Colombians. But in the Colombians' case, they're not making barely any, unlike the Chinese farmers with apple juice. Next, let's talk about cultures and influences. With the cultures change with globalization, we can really look at the banana section for examples of that, where they talked about how Americas are used to the normal yellow bananas, but yet there's so many different kinds in Costa Rica. But we only know about the yellow one because the businesses believe that's the one that's going to sell. And it shows the culture of Costa Rica, who's used to have all these different kinds of banana, are now narrowing down on one. And that's because of American influence over them. Another good example of culture influence is actually in the chocolate section, when they talked about child labor. And they talked about how people in West Africa are all for child labor because they believe it gives character, and the kids are not doing anything anyways. But Western influences are like, you can't make children work on fields because it's unsafe. But the culture in West Africa doesn't see anything wrong with that, but our culture does. So it shows Westernization trying to influence West Africa to stop stop not abusing, but making kids work. How trade changes. The coffee section does very well on this too, because he talks about, again, how it's not that simple anymore. The coffee beans don't just, Starbucks doesn't just collect coffee beans from their local grower and grow there. Now they go from Colombia, and there's a middleman in between there that transfers the coffee beans from the farmer, and then they get the coffee beans to Starbucks. So it kind of shows how it's more complicated than most people think. It isn't just like, ooh, let me go in my backyard and dig up some coffee beans to make you coffee anymore. Now let's finally talk about knowledge and how knowledge has been changed with globalizations. In the banana section, they talk about Earth University and how that's people who know how to farm, who want to educate these people in places trying to start from that don't have any idea what they're doing. And they can go to this university and they educate them, like people from America and stuff, educate them how to farm right and right practices to be able to be successful farmers. What I love about this book is that when you see the cover of this book, Where Am I Eating?, you think Tinnerman's just going to talk about food, but he really does that just to get the reader's attention. And when reading, you realize this has nothing to do with food. This is really about the changing culture with us all being able to really communicate to each other. So what I would say is this book is not for chefs. This book is for people who are interested about the intertwining of cultures and the resulting factors.